Thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about brief research, how it differs from memo research, and I'll give you some strategies you can use on your brief assignment when you're doing the legal research portion. Let's get started. Make sure we're all in the right place and come to Lexis, which is www.lexisnexis.com/law school. Or what I like to do is just Google Lexis Law School, sign in, and you'll get to this screen. Don't forget that your rep's contact information is here on the page. Your student reps are there if you want to reach out to them. And down at the bottom, you'll have the Lexis customer support phone number that you can call 24/7 to help you with your research assignment. They are very good, and most of them have their JDs. They've been in your shoes, and they're there to help you for anything you need on Lexis. I'm going to go straight to Lexis Plus now, and we'll look at the research system. Our hypo today is quite simple, and it comes from a true story that happened to a friend of mine. She runs a local dog walking company in the South Bay of Los Angeles, and she had a dog walker that quit and decided to contact all of his prior clients, telling them he'd continue to walk their dogs. She sued him in small claims court that this was her customer list. It was a trade secret violation, and she won. So we're going to actually use this beyond, use this in a real court in California. Since small claims court, you don't need to follow the letter of the law like you do in a real California court. So that's what we're going to do today. Some resources to help you with your brief. Come on down and you'll see law school resources here under tools and resources. Here you will find the 1L Resource Center. It's laid out very smartly so you can scroll down and find a whole section on brief and memo research. There's some tips for do's and don'ts of brief writing here, and you'll have a whole different options here to look at for writing briefs. I encourage you to open them up. You'll see this one talks about the writing process of an argument for a legal brief, the components, everything that goes into your brief assignment. You'll see one of them is the table of authorities that you guys are going to have to do as well. So back on the Resource Center, you'll see there's a whole video on creating a table of authorities, your TOA. So when it comes time for that, know that Lexis has a feature that can create your table of authorities in minutes instead of painfully going through each of your authorities one at a time and listing them. All right, so let's start entering in some terms. I'm going to start typing trade secret, misappropriation. And you can see Lexis is actually suggesting the phrase trade secret misappropriation. It's great when you select something Lexis is suggesting because our algorithm works even better when you select something that Lexis suggests. But I'm also going to say and customer list. That's very important to the trade secret. So we're going to make sure that we talk about that point as well. And when I use the word and, it means we're getting trade secret misappropriation and customer list. Both of those things must be in our results. Now it's time to take a look at our legal issue, the trade secret misappropriation, and find out more about what the law is on misappropriation. So to do that, we usually always start in secondary materials. And if you remember from your memo, that's where we started, secondary materials. But I told you then there is a half step here called practical guidance. It's not always appropriate for your particular assignment that you're working on. So what I encourage you to do is pop it open and see what populates. And if you can't find what you're looking for within 1 minute, then you'll move on to the secondary materials step. But look, right here, I'm seeing there's a trade secret fundamentals video, and you're going to get all the tips you need on the fundamentals of trade secret law, right? And if I scroll down just a little bit, there's a whole document on trade secret misappropriation, the elements. So when I come on into this, I can start to quickly see what the elements are that I need to think about when doing trade secret law. And it's talking about what's a trade secret, what are the law backing it up, what things to consider. And these would be things that you would be probably writing about in your brief. It will talk about the different elements like the secrecy requirement and the things to think about regarding secrecy. And what this means is it's telling me the different ideas that you must have to meet the secrecy requirement, which actually is going to become our trickiest element to prove regarding my friend and her dog walking company because of the route her big pink dog van drives in the South Bay. Everyone kind of knows where her dog van are and where those clients are. So we may have trouble meeting that secrecy requirement. So let's dig deeper now in secondary materials and see more treatises that can help me with that secrecy issue even more. So I'm going to make sure I go now to secondary materials, and these are your filters you're going to apply. The best filter for secondary materials is to immediately narrow to treatises and guides. This will give you an understanding of what the law is for misappropriation of customer lists. And that's what we need right now. We need to understand what the law is and figure out what the elements are that we're going to need to prove to be able to prove a trade secret violation. You can narrow further by jurisdiction. So you can see I've narrowed right to California. But if you have a federal issue, go ahead and narrow to federal court instead. For those of you in Hawaii, or perhaps you have a jurisdiction outside of California, you want to click non-jurisdictional. Unless you see you have the jurisdiction in New York, you have a lot of resources there, go ahead and check them out. But if you're finding you have New Hampshire or Hawaii, it's not even listed, then you want non-jurisdictional so you can get those resources that aren't state specific but talk about all the states. Okay, but if we're in California law, we'll leave that one clicked. The next place I like to go is kind of just a little peek for me. I click open my sources tab so I can start to see what the sources are that are populating in my result set. If I was walking over to a bookshelf in the library, what would the sources look like? And as your Lexis rep, I'm just going to let you know that California Forms of Pleading and Practice is one of the #1 practice guides of all things California law. So when you see this one, it's usually a great book to take a look at. And so we're going to do that now. I'm going to check this box and we'll look to see what's within. So if you guys are finding California Forms of Pleading and Practice, that's a good box to check. You certainly can check more boxes. If you've heard of Witkin before and you want to take a look at that, you can check that. We can always click to see more. Maybe you want to look at California torts or California business litigation and so on. So you can click the few that you want. So here we are. We've got Forms of Pleading and Practice, and I can see that we are in unfair competition, trade secrets, and it says application of UTSA. That stands for Uniform Trade Secrets Act. That looks pretty good to me, so I can check that box. And I can keep going down and check the boxes of the resources that are looking good. And when I'm done, if I want, I can move those into a folder. So if I have to go to lunch and do some more research later, I've forgotten what resources look good to me, they're sitting in my folder waiting for me to do that. The first time you use a folder, you'll need to click choose a folder and then create new folder, and you'll be good. You'll know how to create a folder after that point. Okay, but if you want to go into something, you just click the title and you're coming in. So if our professor told us we are going to have a statute on point and Uniform Trade Secret Act is a great place to start to understand your topic, then we know we've got a statute in play and this is the right place to be in. So I'm going to take some time and understand what's on the screen. What I'm looking for are the elements that I need to prove. So I'm starting to understand what the law is and grab the elements for trade secret. And here we go. A trade secret means, and then it goes on to describe each of the elements. And one of the elements is that there was reasonable effort under the circumstances to maintain its secrecy. So that's really important to the statute. And as we heard, that's probably the issue that's going to be most important for us. Because my friend drives a big pink dog van whenever she parks in someone's house, it's really clear to the community of Hermosa where the dogs are and who are her clients when she parks there. So we want to know, is that a secret customer list when it's very apparent to the neighbors who is a client of my friend's dog walking company? So we're looking for case law right now that discusses when a customer list is held secret. And are there any discussion of these routes or very noticeable vans or things like that that people in the community pick up on, causing it to be not a trade secret? If we're finding any cases like that, then we want to make sure that we make a note of that, and we'll probably use that case in our memo assignment. So we're going to take our time and read this. So way to move around the screen is to open your table of contents. Now I can see, okay, here I am. This is the page we're in, and I can crack it open, make sure I'm getting everything I need here. So back up. When you have a statute on point, you can click right to it. If your professors gave you the statute, you can type it in on Lexis, go straight to it. But if you didn't, you want to go to codes under statutes and legislation. And then your next filter is the jurisdiction, of course. So put in federal if you have a federal jurisdiction, but we want state law. So I'm going to put in California. And now we're looking at California code sections. Now, this is the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, just like we saw in our secondary source that we just read. So we know this is the one, and I'm going to come on in the beginning of the statute. Now, you know what to do here. We're going to take our time and we're going to read this statute. But what I also want you to do is pay attention to the subsections, because we are going to want to make sure we know what subsection most applies to us. So for me, it's B. Okay, keep that in mind. We're going to use that in just a second. Now, we're going to come down. You can either scroll down and you'll see the notes or the notes and decisions. Another way to get there, especially if you guys have a federal statute, it's a lot easier when you have a state statute. They tend to be much smaller than federal statutes. You can always click this search terms button and you'll see notes and decisions. Sometimes it's called case notes. Click case notes or notes of decisions, and now you will start to see a table of contents. You're going to go through this one line at a time, making sure you don't miss anything. And of course, pay close attention to where your terms are. We want to pay attention to any section that talks about customer lists, right? So I jump down and now I'm going to read this in detail. Your professors have set up your assignment, so case notes are going to be an important part of your research if you have a statute on point. So don't forget this step. Go to notes, find the best section of the notes to read, and pay attention to the cases. Now, if your professors told you, I only want you to look at cases that are after a certain date, then we're going to need to make sure that we see, okay, that's 1986. They told me to look in the 90s, so I'm going to pass that up and look for the right cases here too. But again, we're looking for those cases that discuss secrecy, and I can find something that I can relate my topic to. Another thing you can do when you're in a statute is to shepherdize your statute, or right up here, citing decisions. These are all the cases that have ever cited your statute. This is a great body of research to use because your cases will have to cite the statute at some point. What I want you to do first is know that, of course, you're going to narrow to your jurisdiction. I want to stick to California. But there is another really cool button here. Remember, I told you have to pay attention to your subsections. If you're at Southwestern, I know you want to click this button. I know what your topic is. We're going to click by subsection. And remember, I said ours was B, right? So when we scroll down, we're looking for B2. That one's A. That's not helpful, just B. So I'm going to click this one. There are a lot of references here, so I'll just go into B. Make sure we're in California law. We'll get rid of that federal law. Another thing is your professors will tell you to narrow to published cases. Make sure you do that because a lot of cases go unpublished. Now, when I narrow to my subsection, I'm down to 22 cases. So at this point, I would really read these 22 cases and see how they talk about my subsection, why they're on point, and which ones I want to use. If I want to, we can always narrow further by timeline. Remember, I said maybe you only want cases from 1990 and on. Then, of course, I can swing this little bar graph around and my date changes, and I can filter by date as well. So remember, when we were in your statute, we used your case notes and we shepherdize your statute. Okay, finally, we're ready for case law, right? This is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. And of course, we want to narrow right away to the court. So know that you can be really specific here. If you're in a certain circuit, you can be specific to that circuit. You can even dive down to a particular jurisdiction within that circuit. We can do the same thing for California. If you're told just Court of Appeals cases, then that's what you click, and we'll do that. If you're unsure, just click all of California, and that will work as well. So make sure you narrow to jurisdiction. Remember, We talked about publication status. I'm going to add that as well. I only want published cases. Look how many we dropped down to just by doing that, right? And now I'm ready to take a look at my Ravel view. That's a different view of my site list. These are all my cases that are populating, the 36 cases, but I'm going to take a look at them now in Ravel view. They'll show up on a map. The bigger the bubble, the more influential that case is to my research. So I want to make sure I definitely look at these big bubble cases. And sure enough, regarding our topic, these big bubble cases are the ones that we would be talking about in class. Now, I'm not going to tell you to ignore all the other ones. I just specifically want you to take a look at these big bubble cases. Of course, you can click it and Lexis will jump you to that case and you can open it up from there. So again, we're not going to ignore all the other cases, but we want to make sure we don't miss the cases that are more influential because other cases are citing to them. We can see all the cases that cite to More Life right now. So that's probably a very helpful case. And most likely by this point, you've already read about More Life in your secondary source. You may have read about it in when you did your statutory research. So we're coming into More Life now. Okay, once you're in a case that you love, we're going to use that case. We're going to use the case summary to help us understand what's going on in this case. We need to make sure that the outcome discusses the case the way we need the court to discuss our case. So when they're focusing in on the right things, we use the overview to help us do that. Sometimes the outcome helps us. And then we need these head notes. Remember, head notes are your rules of law, right? So we want to pay attention to the ones that have to do with trade secrets, and I'm going to make sure that I pay attention to those. So this one has to do with contracts, and then we have another trade secrets one. So I'm going to pay attention to these, and you can see, wow, this one is really being highlighted because my term customer list is coming up. Kind of a cool thing. If you see a little piece of paper and it looks like it's on point, customer list, you can always click that piece of paper and get a topic summary on the law of customer list. So now I can get that topic summary and the seminal cases that I need to hit and the elements I need to prove. But even better, if your jurisdiction is off to the side here, we can switch it because it defaults you to federal law. And now I'm in California and my definition changes. And you'll see there's the Uniform Trade Secret Act, the statute that we took a look at, the subsections that we need. These are the leading cases and the elements that I need to prove. So when you see that little piece of paper being highlighted in your case, you might want to take a look and see if it's helpful to you. And you remember, I saw that right next to my little head notes. Okay. Finally, you can shepherdize your cases as well. And you know by now that we need to do that, right? We need to check to see, is there anything bad going on here? And we can see, okay, we have a cautionary analysis. Is this case bad law to me? I click it. Why was it giving cautionary analysis? Well, my cases, there are cases distinguishing themselves from my case. So now I just need to read and find out, is there anything in here that they're distinguishing themselves on that have to do with my facts? Because if there isn't, I don't need to worry about that. It's usually fine when you see a yellow. Don't worry too much about yellow. You want to worry when the signal is orange or red, okay? But we can also do this for citing purposes. We can use More Life because it's our leading case and get all the cases that cite to More Life. Remember, we did this for your statute. We had a statute on point. We shepardized and got all the cases that cite your statute. Now we're doing it for case law. If your professors gave you the names of a couple cases, you will want to shepardize them, okay? Pull your citing decisions open. Narrow by court. Voila. We click open California, and here we are. Again, published cases only. And now I've got 20 cases that cite to my leading case. So I'm going to take my time now and see some of these cases and find out what's going on and how they're discussing my case and if they're helpful for my research. One final but important filter you can always apply when looking through your cases is enter in some search terms and narrow by those terms. So if I have an issue with secrecy, and I can say the problem was the route that my friend took when she drove, or you could say something like noticeable van, or anything to try to trigger those type of cases that would have a similar issue of delivery men or people that people can recognize the vans, and does that make a customer list secret or not? And we want to find those cases. So by putting in terms like secrecy and route, I can now narrow and find just the cases that have those terms in it. So now we're really being specific. And of course, I'm narrowing down my Shepherd's Report for more life, but we could have used the same feature back on our main screen when we were narrowing our case list down as well. Good luck, guys. I'm here if you need me.